Her eyes were missing, her tongue was missing, parts of her lip was missing, and a portion of her skull had fractured, and a piece of her skull had been removed. Hey, what's going on, guys? Today, I have a really cool story. It's actually one of the first unsolved mysteries that really captured my attention and drew me into researching all of these kind of crazy unsolved mysteries that are out there. The too long didn't read version of this is you have 9 highly experienced hikers that go off into the mountains and die under extremely mysterious conditions. There are photos and journal entries. I mean, there's just a preponderance of evidence, but no one can make any sense of it. And to this day, it is one of the single most interesting things that I've ever found on the internet. So, in 1959, 10 hikers decided to head out on this 190-mile journey through the Ural Mountains in the northern part of the Soviet Union. Now, this was not a vacation. This was more like a mission to this group of experienced hikers, because in completing this 190-mile journey, they would receive their level 3 hiker certification, which at the time was the highest in the country. So they would be the top dogs in hiking. So on January 25th, they set off on this 16-day, 190-mile journey. The group was in good spirits. The pictures of them, they were happy. They were on course. Everything was going right. And then they reached this kind of critical juncture in the trip. They reached this mountain pass that actually was subsequently renamed the Dyatlov Pass after the leader of the group. The leader was named Igor Dyatlov. And so they reach this mountain pass and they know they need to go through it. They need to negotiate this mountain pass. And so they set up camp, and the plan is early the next day, they're going to attempt to push through this mountain pass, and hopefully over the space of one day, they will be able to get through that mountain pass and set up camp on the other side. So early the next morning, they get up and they begin their ascent through this mountain pass. But unfortunately, a very bad weather system rolled in and it pushed them off course. And in fact, it pushed them onto a different slope that the local Mansi tribe called Dead Mountain. And so they get pushed off course. They're not going to get to the mountain pass. And then one of the first strange things happens. For some reason, now this group of experienced hikers that should have known that their best bet at this point, because of the bad weather and being pushed off course, would be to retreat off the mountain and find somewhere that was more protected to spend the night, because at this point they got to set up camp somewhere. But for some reason they decide to stay on the exposed slope of Dead Mountain, which means that they would be setting up camp in not only just a wickedly windy area, and there's like risk of avalanche and any number of things could happen, but they'd also be exposed to negative 40-degree temperatures. They're like out in the open, just getting crushed by the elements. But for whatever reason, they made camp right on the slopes of Dead Mountain. So when the hikers don't show up to a rendezvous point that they were supposed to meet at a predetermined time, the folks they were set to meet, who obviously didn't meet up with the hikers, they let authorities know. You know, it was noted that they had not made rendezvous, but because this was an experienced group, this was not a, now let's send out the search party. It was more like, okay, they should have been here, but it's 9 people, they know what they're doing, they'll get here soon. 3 weeks go by, and still no one's heard from these 9 hikers. And at this point, a search party is sent out, even including military units are sent out to find them. And relatively quickly, the search party comes across the campsite on Dead Mountain. And what they find is just horrifying. So the first thing they notice is that the tent they had been staying in had been slashed open, except from the inside, meaning someone inside the tent had slashed it open. And then in the tent itself, neatly stacked, was all their cold weather gear, or the majority of their cold weather gear, like their shoes and their jackets. I mean, it's all there. And there's no sign of the hikers. And then near the camp, like literally right out of his tent, is this neat set of footprints leading down towards this forest. And investigators, when they looked at the footprints, they could determine a couple of things. One, the majority of the hikers had either been barefoot or only wearing one shoe. In addition, their cadence, they were looking at the space of their footsteps, their gait, I should say, was indicative of a group of people that was walking calmly. This was not a panicked run away from your campsite. This was a walking calmly away from your campsite with not the right clothing on, probably no shoes on, down to the forest in an exposed mountain slope with negative 40-degree temperatures. So investigators, they start following these footsteps down towards this forest, and it leads them to this area right at the outside of this forest, right underneath this big cedar tree, where there's evidence of a campfire. And around that campfire are two of the hikers' bodies. I mean, they're just wearing underwear, they're barefoot, and their hands had been, like, scraped. The palms of their hands have been badly scraped. And the tree that was right next to them had evidence of someone had been trying to climb it. A lot of the branches have been ripped down, as if someone had desperately tried to climb up this tree, but was unsuccessful, as if they were trying to, seek shelter from something or someone on the ground. But obviously they did not make it in time. Within several hundred feet of that campfire, the investigators found 3 other hikers' bodies. They were similarly underdressed, and it appeared, the way their bodies had frozen, that they were actually trying to make their way back up to the campsite. Investigators noted that one of those 3 hikers had a head injury that was consistent with someone repeatedly smashing their head. Another of those 3 had a strange rectangular bruise on their side. And then, oddly enough, while they were underdressed, each of those 3 were wearing the other's bits of clothing. It was like they all collectively put on the wrong clothes, and not enough clothes. Despite the strangeness of the 5 bodies that were found, and what they were wearing, or I guess what they weren't wearing, it was determined that they all died of hypothermia and that there was no foul play. It wasn't until May, when the weather warmed up a little bit and some of the snow had melted, that investigators were able to locate the remaining 4 hikers' bodies. And, it was really the condition that they were found in, the second group of hikers, that really took this mystery and elevated it and made it this kind of urban legend, because it makes no sense how they were found. So the remaining 4 were found in this creek bed that came to be known as the Dyatlov Den. They were buried under about 13 feet of snow. And so of the 4 bodies that were found in the Dyatlov Den, one of them had simply died of hypothermia and kind of was a lot like the first group, right? There's no severe injuries, really, just they died of hypothermia. But the other 3, that was not the case at all. The 7th hiker had a skull fracture that occurred right before he died. The 8th hiker had these extreme chest fractures that it was almost like you've been hit by a car. The 9th hiker really was the most unfortunate. Not only did she also have her chest kind of caved in, but her eyes were missing, her tongue was missing, parts of her lip was missing, and a portion of her skull had fractured, and a piece of her skull had been removed. Even more bizarre is, in this second group, they had all taken pieces of clothing from the other, indicating that they had all died at different times. It was like one would die, and then the other hikers would take their clothes and put them on. And then someone else would die, and they would take their clothes and put them on. And I guess even stranger than that is the clothes themselves had traces of radiation on them. The Soviet government was quick to close the case. They cited, either a natural disaster or, perhaps the hikers' incompetence as the result or the reason behind this horrible tragedy. But, nobody really believed, nobody as in the family, the friends, really the Soviet population, they didn't believe that could be the actual explanation. Early on, after this case has been closed, the Soviet people, they started to believe a couple theories. One of them was there was this local Mansi tribe that was in the area that perhaps ambushed the hikers and killed them. That would kind of explain the reason for the hikers suddenly abandoning their tent and not be dressed, and also the injuries of the second group. That could be explained by, an attack by this Mansi tribe. But there was a couple issues with that theory. One, the Mansi tribe is known as this incredibly peaceful tribe. That it's just very uncharacteristic for them. There was also no other footprints leading into the area. It was just the footprints of the hikers that were, in the area. Another popular theory is a swift and violent avalanche that, the group couldn't have seen coming. They hear it at the last minute. They jump out of their tent, cut it open, they go running. But the problem with that is the tree line down near the forest they walk to, there's no sign that the trees have been damaged in any way. There weren't any debris from an avalanche like there would be. And in that area, there were locals like the Mansi tribe, and they didn't report an avalanche. They didn't hear an avalanche. And in fact, historically, there had never been a reported avalanche in that area. And subsequently, for decades afterward, there still has never been an avalanche there. Another popular theory is that the reason they left their tent in the first place is because when you get hypothermia, it can cause you to actually believe, kind of paradoxically, that you're actually too hot and you start stripping your clothes before you ultimately succumb to hypothermia. But again, that doesn't really cover down on the injuries of the second group. And then, of course, with any sort of unsolved mystery at this magnitude, there's theories that range from, government cover-up to a Yeti attack or an alien abduction. This case was closed, and the Soviet government kind of just gave a fairly ambiguous answer as to why. Authorities actually officially said that the cause of death for these hikers was a compelling natural force that they were not able to overcome. Which that in and of itself is an eerie way of putting it, right? They were unable to overcome a natural force. And it's not saying this was a natural disaster necessarily. They're just saying it was a natural force. Which is just a very interesting way to put it. But either way, the case was closed, and that was that. But in 2019, Russia actually officially reopened this case, and they decided they were going to get to the bottom of it, because this was a case that, it is quite high profile in the world of kind of unsolved mysteries. I think if you Google, top 10 unsolved mysteries, the Dyatlov Pass is going to come up in that top 10. This is just one of the more well-known cases. And so Russia officially reopens it in 2019, but they were only willing to look at 3 theories, which was, an ice slab or a snow slab breaking and coming down and hitting them, an avalanche, or a hurricane. But unfortunately, despite diving into this and doing their diligence, they really didn't come to any sort of conclusive conclusion. They kind of they closed it, I should say, much the same way they did back when it actually happened in the late 50s, which is, some natural force did this. That was it. It was really unsatisfying. The only real conclusion that they made in 2019 was that no criminal activity was indicated. So whatever happened, they're saying what was natural. It was not, it was not criminal. So with that, the mystery today remains technically closed, but unofficially, I would say this mystery is not even close to solved. And I'd love to hear in the comments what you think happened at Dyatlov Pass. So that's gonna do it, guys. I encourage you to go check this out, Dyatlov Pass. It's fascinating. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. And also, please turn on notifications so you don't miss any of these stories. And we're putting these out weekly. It'll range from mysteries to scary stuff to disturbing, creepy stuff. It's gonna just generally